Hey, welcome back to the channel. My name is Joel Duff, and we're here for a little episode of Critiquing Creationism. Actually, no, this isn't going to be Critiquing Creationism. Slash that, strike out. This is going to be praising creationism. Yes, they have kudos to creation.com and Creation Ministries International for publishing an article that corrects some errors that creationists have made. I got to give them full credit for it. This is a fantastic article. I want to run through a few things in it. So, all right, so let's get, whoa, well, look at that. I just realized that I put my coffee in a green cup today, and the green screen, that's fun, isn't it? Look at that silhouette on my head. Okay, enough of that. Wait, I do need a drink though. Okay, that'll keep us going. Dinosaurs on ancient artifacts? Question mark. A reappraisal of 12 examples. If you engage in any conversations about creation and evolution on the internet, you're sure to run into those who have proof positive that dinosaurs live with human beings. And that comes from a series of artifacts. They often have like, well, look, there's this picture of a dinosaur living with a human, or this artist depicted a dinosaur in a painting, and so forth, right? This is proof that dinosaurs have existed recently. And these stories go round and round and round. There's been many, many, many debunkings of them. I have talked about several of them, several of which are going to be in this particular article. And here we have Creation Ministries International, Keaton Halley, who is doesn't have a scientific background, has a background in apologetics, is a writer, speaker for Creation Ministries International, has written this article, sure to ruffle a number of feathers because this is the article. This is going to be the go-to article, right? Anytime somebody says, brings that up in a Facebook X post or whatever, I'm just going to refer to this particular article. This is a young earth creationist who is debunking these popular examples of dinosaurs having lived with modern humans. I want to start by just saying thanks to Keaton Halley and Creation Ministries International. They've done it again. Creation Ministries International, CMI or creation.com here, has been of the three biggie institutions, right? Answers in Genesis, Institute for Creation Research, and Creation Ministries International. Of those three, they've been on the whole more willing to critique creationism itself, which is so necessary. Now, I know a number of young earth creationists, mostly on outside of the big organizations. We'll call them independent young earth creationists, who are, on the whole, more thoughtful, all right, about young earth creationism. And they are very critical of these sorts of arguments for young earth creationism and think that this really gives young earth creationism a bad name. And that's why I'm saying that creation.com has been more willing to sort of tackle those types of things, talk about arguments that young earth creationists shouldn't use. And here's another example of them publishing an article that, as we'll see, well, let's just go right down to the end. Well, let's just TLDR it down here. Conclusion. Besides the 12 artifacts evaluated here, there are many others that have been presented as evidence for human-dinosaur coexistence. Each must be weighed with its own merits. This article is not intended to encourage knee-jerk dismissals of every ancient artifact that could possibly depict a dinosaur. In other words, we still believe the earth is young. We still believe that dinosaurs were on the ark and therefore got off the ark, and people witnessed dinosaurs. All right. This author and Creation Ministries International is not denying that. That's something that comes part and parcel with young earth creationism. However, they are recognizing that just because we believe this doesn't mean that every piece of evidence you throw out there and say that this is proof of that or evidence for that particular view isn't good evidence. And that's what they're saying here. It's like, but we do encourage everyone to carefully evaluate claims made about ancient dinosaur art on a case-by-case basis. Unfortunately, many that have been put forward are quite weak. And that's what this article is about. It goes through these 12 popular examples that are all over the internet and basically debunks every single one of them. Our desire is to help others avoid being fooled by the above examples, as well as any others that are similarly dubious. Going forward, creationists need to resist jumping to the conclusion that an object depicts a dinosaur simply because of a superficial resemblance. And that's exactly what most of these are. Oh, it's got a long neck. Well, sauropods had long necks, so therefore that's evidence that there were sauropods that this author had witnessed, or this artist had witnessed. No, we need to dig deeper. If another object has a clear pedigree and many specific parallels between the artwork and a dinosaur, we can welcome it. But for now, we recommend that fellow creationists avoid using poor arguments like the 12 misguided evidence covered above. So he's saying all 12 of these examples, I'll scroll through here and you can see some of these are various artworks that supposedly depict dinosaurs or reptiles of some sort. Yeah, there's the Plesiosaur, there's Okay, there you go. That was a brief preview of the different examples, and we're not going to go through every one of them. The point here is just to make you aware of this particular article, to thank Creation Ministries International for doing a service to the young Earth creationist community, and to say job well done. I think his intro is very good. Right, this good writing. In a 2016 speech, Apple CEO Tim Cook jokingly claimed he spotted someone holding an iPhone in a 17th century painting. Right, this painting right over here. He even showed a photo of a painting to prove it. There, on this historic canvas, was a thin rectangular handheld object of just the right size and shape. But the name on the painting, man holding a letter to a woman, spoils the fun. If you didn't know the name of the painting, though, right? You could say, well, that's evidence that there was iPhones before there were iPhones. And of course, the analogy here is going to be, well, there's also dinosaurs more recently than you thought there were dinosaurs, right? You think dinosaurs are all extinct, didn't live with humans, but look, here's a picture. Here's something where a human is being depicted with a dinosaur. Soon, a cluster of web articles appeared that highlighted other historical paintings in which people appeared to be engrossed in their smartphones, right? Since smartphones were not invented until decades or centuries after the paintings were made, the images made for a good laugh. To believe that these works of art really depicted modern phones would be a misinterpretation. All right, so there's your setup. It's going to be, now he's going to go through and show like the most obvious interpretation of all these different supposed evidences of dinosaurs living with humans. The most obvious interpretation of these does not lead you to these are dinosaurs, but there are other more obvious interpretations. But we simply see what we want to see. Unfortunately, there's a similar phenomena occurring in creationist circles where historical artwork has sometimes been misunderstood, and it's no laughing matter. Creationists have accumulated dozens of examples of ancient artifacts depicting creatures which it has been argued strongly resemble dinosaurs or other extinct reptiles like pterosaurs or plesiosaurs. These have been put forward as evidence that people in historical times, even up to just a few centuries ago, must have lived alongside dinosaurs because they incorporated observational knowledge of these animals into their paintings, carvings, mosaics, and tapestries. I think that word observational is very important because, Ken Ham often, talks about observational evidence being like the most powerful, not, historical information. No, these are observations. And because an artist did this and an artist is human, it's their observation. And we can trust that much more than we can other forms of historical evidence. However, further investigation has revealed that quite a few of these supposed dinosaurs were, in fact, misidentifications. Sadly, for this creationist, critics of creationist movements have done most of the legwork exposing these errors. Yes, every single one of these examples below, I know of a non-young earth creationist, many times a Christian, theist, who has pointed out to young earth creationists that this is not a good argument. And so once those errors have been, now I think I disagree with the next clause here, to the embarrassment of those who have promoted them uncritically. I'm not sure how many people are actually embarrassed by promoting them. I've seen them promoted over and over and over again. I've pointed out the errors and the really obvious errors in some of these. And then I've seen the same person posted again over and over and over again. And I've seen other people provide criticisms, the same criticisms that are going to be in this article by a young earth creationist, but that's why this particular article is so valuable. When somebody's not in your camp, it's easy just to dismiss what they say, not really open your eyes to that particular evidence, not take a critical view of oneself because it's coming from the outside, coming from a critic. But this is coming from the inside. This is coming from one of your own. This is coming from somebody who comes from the heart of, I believe that dinosaurs did live with humans, but this is not good evidence for that. And you're embarrassing yourself by saying so, even if you may not feel embarrassed. This person's embarrassed for the rest of the creationist community who is doing this. When it comes to dinosaur artifacts, we creationists have sometimes been guilty of drawing hasty conclusions without thoroughly studying the objects themselves and their cultural context. We've also sometimes made the mistake known as pareidolia, reading patterns into ambiguous imagery, like seeing figures in the clouds or the Virgin Mary on a piece of toast. In this article, I will critically examine 12 commonly cited examples and argue that these artifacts do not actually depict dinosaurs. So we don't need to go through all these. Again, I'm just here to raise awareness of this very good young earth creationist article. All of these arguments are very cogent, and he's careful not to name names in terms of which creationists have been using these. And he doesn't necessarily give credit to critics who have pointed these errors out, but I completely appreciate him using the information on the internet about these particular supposed dinosaurs and using them in his argument. I think it's probably fair to read his caveat at the beginning, and I've already said this, but let me use his words for him. We are not denying that there could be some genuinely ancient artifacts that do indeed depict dinosaurs. Many more examples have been put forward than the few we critique here, and we are not suggesting they should all be dismissed with the wave of a hand. Of course, he doesn't provide any examples he thinks are potentially good examples, right? So I think if he knew of some that he was very confident in, he probably would have said, maybe we should look to this one. But the fact that he doesn't do so suggests that, all of these are probably questionable. Some artifacts may have stronger credentials than other ones, than the ones examined below. So we are not retracting every example Creation Ministries International has used in the past. However, we are saying that the following examples should not be touted as evidence for human and dinosaur coexistence. So these are the ones that he's very confident in. These do not represent examples of dinosaurs and humans living together. We understand that this may be upsetting to people who have used these artifacts as evidence for creationist interpretation of Earth's history, but CMI has long taken a stand of avoiding popular arguments that are not well-founded. I would agree. CMI and I would disagree vehemently about the interpretation of a lot of evidence, but I think they hold a somewhat higher standard to scientific integrity than does Answers in Genesis and Creation Institute for Creation Research for the most part. If readers are bothered by the case we present, we suggest they read classic CMI articles like Moving Forward, arguments that creationists shouldn't use, the knockout punch syndrome, dinosaurs are almost certainly extinct, right? They argue that, we don't really believe that any dinosaurs still exist. They were on the ark, but they went extinct very soon afterwards from their perspective. Integrity demands that we do not use these arguments. We should care more about truth than winning people to our perspective. If truth requires us to abandon certain arguments, then so be it. We need not be afraid of truth either. If truth is generally on our side as six-day creationists, then we have nothing to fear from an honest investigation and a fair evaluation of the evidence. Our bedrock commitment is to truth of Scripture, not to any specific argument of dinosaurs being contemporaneous with humans. As CMI has long said, we should hold to the Bible tightly, but to supporting arguments loosely. These arguments are not equal in authority to the Bible itself. This is this is well said, and this is one of the biggest problems I have with Answers in Genesis is that the evidence becomes almost equal to Scripture, or what Ken Ham says goes, becomes close to the authority of the Bible itself. CMI is not beyond reproach in this regard either. We have published a handful of books and articles in the past that featured some of these bad arguments. Thus, we are now taking steps to remedy our own errors. In fact, we have already begun modifying future editions of current books and have added caveats to online articles with the necessary retractions. All right, so then they go on, start talking about. So I'll just hit a couple here because they're probably the ones you most recognize. The Black Dragon Canyon Pterosaur. I've been hit with this one multiple times, as you know, commenters on various social media posts have thrown this in my face as like, well, look at this, there's a pterosaur, on this rock. Here's the head of the pterosaur, here's the wings over here, just in case it's not obvious to you. All right, and standing on these two legs. But those have been looked at much more closely with sophisticated technology, and basically it is a collage of multiple different images that, together with the erosion of the rock and the fading of that material, gives the general appearance of a pterosaur. In addition to that, there's a white outline that's been drawn about it by someone who first discovered it, took pictures of it, and they sketched it out on the rock itself in order to accentuate sort of the pterosaur look. Right? I mean, this is pretty obviously not a pterosaur. Right? It doesn't take a lot of work to look farther into the evidence that's been collected about it and to come to the conclusion this is not a depiction of a pterosaur. And yet this is not, it comes up, and it's in books. It's all over. I don't say all over. It's not in the Institute for Creation Research, Creation Ministries International, or Answers in Genesis material, all right, which are sort of the big organizations. It's more of a fringe argument, but those fringe elements find their ways into a lot of the crevices of the internet and onto a lot of bulletin boards and so forth. This one is especially pervasive. The long-necked creatures of the Narmar, I think it's Narmer. The long-necked creatures of I believe it might be Narmer palette. And so, yeah, so many people I've seen this so many times on social media. Look at those long-necked dinosaurs. Look at those sauropods twisting their necks together in this ancient Egyptian First Dynasty pot. I'm sorry, look at the head that's not a dinosaur. Look at the ears that's not a dinosaur. Look at the curled tail that's not a dinosaur. Look at the feet, which are not reptilian. Look at the angle of the legs and the hips, which are not dinosaurs. There's nothing else about this that's a dinosaur. I mean, and this author here is as kind as he can be. Nothing identifies these beasts as reptilian or sauropod-like. There is, it's just pretty obvious if you spend a few minutes that this is not a dinosaur. This is not evidence of dinosaurs living with the Egyptians, and so on and so forth. Again, I'm not going to, let's not look at the rest of these. I just wanted to say thank you to Creation Ministries International for sticking their neck out there, publishing this particular article. I mean, yes, this is going to be used by non-young earth creationists, right? And every time that a young earth creationist brings up these arguments, I'm going to be posting this particular article and using it. But that should be for the benefit in the long run of young earth creationists, for exactly the reasons that Creation Ministries International says. Our desire is to help others avoid being fooled by the above examples. Going forward, creationists need to resist jumping to conclusions that an object depicts a dinosaur simply because of a superficial resemblance. The integrity of young earth creationism is at stake, and that's what Creation Ministries International recognizes. So that's it with this episode of Praising Creationism. We'll be back at some point with another episode of what will probably be Critiquing Creationism. We'll see you when we see you. Bye-bye.